The Teach Better team, we're a family. We're dedicated to being even better tomorrow than we were today in every aspect of our personal and professional lives. The Teach Better Speakers Network is dedicated to supporting this entire educational ecosystem. Maybe you're a school leader looking to bring relevant experiential learning, gamification, and rigorous inquiry strategies into your classrooms. Or you're a district leader seeking to make a strong comeback post-pandemic through social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, growth mindset, and a positive school culture. Or perhaps you're a business leader or an event coordinator looking for a powerful keynote speaker at your next event on transformational leadership, social media, community communication, or equity and inclusion practices. Visit teachbetter.com/speakers network to find the best support for your family today.
With 12-hour live. I'm joined by Zach Robbins. Zach, I am so excited that you are here this morning. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me this morning. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I am pumped and I am so thrilled that you and I get to kick off with the first or whatever, the second segment of 12 Hour. I've been so excited to talk shop with you, learn about you, and bring you into the Teach Better family.
I'm so happy to be here with the Teach Better family, and I look so forward to seeing all the amazing green hearts every time someone says the word better.
So good. I love the better. See, you're already catching on, Zach. I know you're a new face to our Teach Better community, but you're just going to fit right in. People are going to think you're a pro.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. So there are people here from all over. I've been looking at the comments. So where's everyone from? Can people just please shout out where they're from?
Yes, I would love to see that. They were doing that earlier, but I love when everybody is able to do that. Shout out to my mother who's commenting. Zach, you get to meet my mother this morning. How exciting.
How you doing, Mom?
Zach, since I know you're a new face to some of the Teach Better community, although I know so many of our internal team has been an advocate for the work you're doing, been following the work you're doing, would you do us a favor? Give us a little bit of background. People are going to be commenting about where they're watching from this morning. I'd love to have you give us a little background of who you are and what you do in education.
Absolutely. My name is Zach Robbins. I have been in education since 1886. I have a principal. I've been a principal since 1952. Actually, I've been a principal for a very, very, very long time. I've been in public education for over 25 years. I have been doing restorative justice work in Nevada. My school began the first restorative justice program in the state. We were the pilot, actually, in our school district, the Clark County School District in Las Vegas. And, we had this issue. We were suspending and expelling kids at a clip of 5-1. And our students of color were just being put out. And it just wasn't right. Because in essence, these are children. So behind all of the snappy comments, behind all of the things that kids do for attention, they're just kids. They want attention. They want approval. They want people to show them that they care. And I'm sure that all the folks out here in Virginia and DC, Illinois, Texas, right outside of Boston, where I came from. Actually, I used to live in Upham's Corner in Boston. So shout out to my people in Boston. So, I know that all the people know exactly what I mean when I say that, children need positive attention. They want their teachers to know that they love and care about them. And once you bind them to you, they work for you. Kids do work for people they like in places they like. So we had to actually put this restorative justice in place to keep kids in school, not just to build relationships, but to divert students away from suspensions and expulsions. And that's the work we've been doing. I've been training people not only all throughout the state, teachers and administrators, but also throughout the country.
Yeah, I know so many people that are following and learning and being better educators because of the work that you are doing. I know so many of them have started following your work on social media or they've seen things on your website, but it is such an honor to have you here teaching and learning with our community because I'll tell you, these are buzzwords you're saying right now, restorative practice, restorative justice. Everyone's like, yeah, I've heard it. But a lot of educators have a misconception that these are concepts that are fluffy. They're concepts that maybe don't apply to them or apply to their students. And it's also a concept that a lot of teachers feel like they're exhausted with because they've used all the tools in their belt to try things. And if they're not successful, they're like, ugh, it's not the right fit for me. So what would you say to educators that are looking at this topic and saying, and it's just a buzzword, does it actually make an impact?
I would say that it's not just a buzzword. I mean, think about it. When we learned how to create lesson plans, I'm sure the first ones weren't so great, but you kept going and you kept trying. When you first learned how to manage the great purpose room or the lunchroom, initially, maybe you didn't do so well making sure your students actually followed the lunch protocols in a way that made sense. But over time, you got it. Let's actually make a parallel to learning sports. Maybe you played softball or baseball. When you first learned how to swing the bat and actually get a hit, maybe you struck out a couple times. Over time, you did better. Maybe you play an instrument. Maybe you learned how to play piano. Maybe you took some time to learn how to actually do your hand over hand. Over time, you learn. So now, granted, I would be the first to tell you, there are some things in public education, and they tell us, and they're just dumb. I'm like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense whatsoever. But these are the basics of making sure that your classroom functions. You cannot have learning in chaos. You must have order. And you want to have order in a way that keeps kids bound to you, that shows them that they care, that keeps them in class. This is fundamental to the way you do school. So no, this is not just a buzzword. And there's also not a pass for poor behavior. That's the one thing that I've been going around, preaching the gospel on. RJ is not, let's just have a talk after a kid has done something wild in a class and just egregious. No, RJ should never be a pass for poor behavior. If a kid has done something egregious, consequences should follow so we can connect and redirect that student's behavior. But RJ is not a kid has done something, put their hands on someone, said something crazy to the teacher, and we just, let it go. We should never let poor behavior go because that undermines a positive learning environment for all.
Sure. I cannot wait to dive into this hour conversation that we are going to have. And I will tell all of our community here, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing this live stream so that all of your friends and family can be exposed to this teaching as well. I will say, I feel like to start out on an even playing field, we're talking about restorative justice, restorative practice. These are words that I've heard. If I wanted to define them, maybe I have people that are tuning in that are just getting into the education field, or maybe they're not in education, but they are drawn to learning more about what's going on in our schools. Can we kind of set some sort of general definition about what we're looking at here this morning?
I would say that restorative practices are those structures, functions, and processes in a class or school that help a student restore their standing in the community after a harm has been committed.
Ooh. Okay, I like this.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So if I wanted to implement, I was a classroom teacher and I'm looking to implement restorative justice, where do I get started?
So great question. Megan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Great question. I saw Megan's comment.
I know. We have a ton of comments coming in. It's like they're all popping all over.
I'm like, wait a minute. And Ray, we are going to be best friends after this broadcast. Just know that. Just know that. So here's the thing. So different school communities will start their restorative practice journey in different places. There are people that are ready for a restorative practice implementation, Ray, that diverts students away from suspension and expulsion and any other sort of exclusionary discipline practice. They are ready for that. Some people are either they're not ready for that or that's not what they need because they don't have an issue with disproportionate suspension and expulsion. Maybe what they need is something that does simply improve relationships between teachers and students and among students. So different people will have to start in different places. Or maybe you have a place that absolutely needs to divert students away from suspension and expulsions, but the environment is not fertile for something like that to take root. So you may have to start at step 1 when they really need to be at step 30, quite frankly, because of just the tone, the temperament of a building. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. You have to be able to look at what a community is ready for and take steps. What you can't do is say, oh, that's a problem, and not do anything. So how to start? There are some places where the principal may not be open to restorative practices, and the teacher has to start doing things in the classroom. So when I coach people throughout the country, that may be the case. So I tell teachers, why don't you start with a community building circle in which you actually bring kids together and just get them to talk to each other, having school appropriate conversations in which they just get to know each other and you as human beings. Start there. In my own school right now, we're about to do some school-wide community building circles because the pandemic put a wedge in the relationships between students and each other because they've been away. And we have 2 whole grade levels of kids who don't even know each other because they haven't been on campus.
Right.
And my school exists in a historic gang community. So I'm so happy that the gang activity hasn't kicked up as bad as it has in the past. But that temperament or that tone will spill over onto the campus. Okay, so right now we feel a need to have community building circles just to bring people together because it's just a small contingent that engages in that behavior, but it's a loud contingent. So the students want to feel together. So that may be where you need to start. Other places, they may have the infrastructure in place to actually have the functions and processes and structures to say, listen, when a kid is about to get put out of school, let's divert them away from exclusionary discipline. And you can put those structures in place. So depending on the needs of a building, you just start. But the option to do nothing is the wrong option.
Right. And it's interesting, Zach, I know we have some comment or some questions in our comments, which is always so exciting. We love when our community chooses to be active learners rather than just consumers. But Zach, as I'm listening to you speak about this first beginning suggestion, trying to gauge whether your principal is ready or not to take this at a school level is really not enough to then not implement anything. Classroom teachers have the power to say, hey, I can start working on these things at a classroom level. And if it dissipates further into the community, wonderful, we're going to do what's best for students. But this is not a situation that if your building is not on board, you as the teacher are left with an inability to implement restorative justice practices, which I really appreciate that reminder.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We have a comment here by Megan Wells. I know we're going to throw that back up on screen. It says, can you give an overview of where you see restorative practices versus in tune with consequences? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm trying to understand the question. Restorative practice versus or in tune, excuse me, with consequences. So let me take a shot at this. So right now, in my own experience, the restorative practices have to fit within a school or a classroom's teacher's behavior response plan. So let me give you a very concrete example. So when I'm working with schools and when I'm coaching teachers, if a student fights, that is not I'm going to divert you away from exclusionary discipline. You shouldn't be in my opinion, you shouldn't be putting your hands on people in school. That is not okay. That is a violation of community norms. So yes, you might get exclusionary discipline for that. Or in my own situation, you got to go. You're not going to be fighting kids in here. So when you come back though, we're going to reach out to all parties' parents and ask for permission. And then we're going to bring you back and we're going to do a restorative justice circle to try to squash the beef. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a situation where we have a structure in place to say, okay, whatever the reason is, let's see if we can get to the bottom of it so you all can coexist. Let me give you a less extreme example. Let's say a student insubordinate in class. Most suspensions for students happen for low-level infractions. So we divert them away from suspension for things like insubordination, defiance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a teacher, kid gets written up, referral is sent, phone call is made. If a kid gets to the administrator or whoever does discipline and they look at that infraction and they may say, this kid is at a point where they're ready to be put out of school for something. Instead of doing that, I'm going to make a decision to send this kid to a restorative structure. So at the point where a kid may get put out, whoever's in charge of that decision says, let's not do that. Let's send this student to a restorative structure. They go through the Restorative Justice Tribunal. There is a decision then that the kid has to make things right. So at that point, after they go through that structure, and through that structure, they may end up with counseling from the counselor, from the school psychologist. They may have to go to the social worker. But after they finish with that structure, they may have to go back and then they may have to write an apology letter to the teacher. They may have to apologize to the whole class. They have to sit down with the teacher and again, make things right. And it's not kids going back to class with their tails between their legs. It's I shouldn't have done this. I have done something to infringe upon the learning experience of others. I need to make this right.
What I really value about not only our conversation here, Zach, but you in general in your teachings of supporting educators with this topic is that this misconception that it's just, holding hands and singing Kumbaya and students aren't given a consequence for making negative choices. I really appreciate your focus on addressing the negative choice in a way that does emphasize that it was a choice that was wrong. But then the restorative practices, the restorative justice conversation comes in when we begin to look at, yes, but we need to get to the root of that problem, or we can make a fair assumption it will happen again. So it's not about not addressing the negative choice. It's about using these practices, taking intentional time to use these practices to say, yes, but if we solve the core issue after the negative decision was dealt with, then we can actually say it may not happen again, which allows that student to be more successful. That is a necessary emphasis that I really appreciate you sharing out here this morning.
And Ray, you're absolutely correct, because in the Restorative Justice Tribunal process, there's a point where the student is taken back into a room with a counselor, and just to help the kid process what happened during the tribunal process. And during that conversation, kids share. They share the things that are on their minds. They share. Sometimes they weep. It's just they just emote the things that have been troubling them. So, and from that process, we then route kids sometimes to therapeutic services because it's the things happening outside of school, or there may be unaddressed trauma that's making it difficult for students to function successfully in class and in school. And sometimes that unaddressed trauma is not, the locus of it isn't solely with the student. It's something that has impacted the whole family.
Sure.
So the family, then we have structures in place where families can receive family conferencing and family therapy free of cost. So we have to address the social emotional needs of children and their entire families, because when they go home, that the enlisting the whole family as partners in learning is essential. It's essential.
And we've seen so many comments of people dying for resources, which we're going to get to in just a second. So hang tight with us. But Zach, I love, again, this focus on the fact that restorative justice is not an opportunity to not address negative choices or negative behaviors, but truly about ensuring it does not continue occurring. And I love the echo of family being a part of this, because our students absolutely have influences that they choose to have in their life, but they also have influences that they have no control over. And if we can support those types of actions, holy moly, I love looking at the whole child, the whole structure, the whole life. That's so great. Zach, I know you have a lot of resources, like a ton. But tell us a little bit. I know you have courses. Can you emphasize how educators might begin getting started if they're like, holy moly, I gotta learn more?
Yes. So 2 things out of many things. So one of the things, of course, you can always reach out to me because my team, we go out and we train. I'm training folks all over the country in this. Also, my book, Restorative Justice Tribunal. I don't believe in that. Put a dangle in a book and call me if you want. And no, I put a whole I put everything in the book, so you can actually learn a lot from the book, and then just call me if you need some more, and I'll just tell you. You know what I mean? Of course, I work with schools and school districts, so you can always call me for that. And then I have a course. I have courses, so people need their professional people. Have you ever gone to these conferences or you've taken a course and you're like, this wasn't very helpful? Well, I have a course at schoolsthatmovesouls.com. Actually, I believe that if it's possible, I don't know if I can put a link in here, but I actually have a link to a course that, and this is one of 10 that's about to be dropping. Okay. So, and it is a course that you can use for salary advancement. And if you need university credit, the University of California, San Diego actually is giving university credit for the course. And it's all job embedded. And for all these folks here, if you ever just want to connect with me directly, I'll just set up some time and we can just get on a Zoom chat or whatever, and I'll answer whatever questions you all have.
I love it. And you know what? Like, truly, that offering that you have here, not only with the speaking and the partnerships that I know you do with school districts, obviously the keynotes, but we're looking at a course. I mean, Teach Better family, we love courses. We love opportunities to get in and learn at our own pace, download resources, do some activities, ask questions. I love that you are able to provide us with like an action step. I mean, here on the Teach Better team, we love talking about overall philosophy. Yes, these things are good, but when we can actually go and dive in further, be a learner, change our practices, that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely. And you know what? And when I did it, I made sure the price point was right, because when I was coming up, I was broke. I was broke. I remember the ramen noodles. I can make a ramen noodle taste like almost anything that is gourmet. So the thing is, I wanted to make sure that it was accessible to people. And that was very important to me. So definitely check that out, because this whole thing of folks making RJ and what you do seem more difficult than it needs to be, that has to stop. And also, RJ is not a pass for poor behavior. I mean, I just have to keep saying that to people, because Ray, this is not, kids cannot be in our classes acting up, because that can't happen. It just can't happen. We have to make sure learning, if there's going to be, there's controlled chaos where we have kids actually seeking their passions. They're having great conversations about content. They're doing the things that clearly indicate that learning is happening in the classroom. And then there's just chaos where there's nothing but foolishness happening. We can't have that.
No good.
No.
So good. Zach, I know you have a lot more to share with us. We still have a half an hour left that we're going to dive into. So I really appreciate not only what you've shared thus far, but also I know the action steps, the suggestions that you're going to be sharing with us here in the next half an hour. I do want to give a little shout out, if you don't mind taking a pause real quick. There are so many things that you are going to be able to learn and consume today, Teach Better family. We love being able to share really great conversations, hopefully lots of giggles, and of course, giveaways. I want to make sure you take a moment to share the link for Zach's course. That's going to be an incredible opportunity that you can share with friends or family, colleagues, leadership teams, so we can all be better in this area. And on the same vein, if you're interested, open another tab on your computer or pop this over on your cell phone. I want to give a shout out to teachbetter.com/12-hour giveaways. We're so grateful to so many members of our network who have graciously donated a lot of different things, specifically swag. I love a good swag item. So I want to encourage you to head over to teachbetter.com/12-hour giveaways, and you're going to find a lot of swag there. There are shirts from Reflect Ed podcast. There's podcast PD swag. There is Beginning Teacher Wednesday podcast swag. There's Out of the Trenches podcast swag. And there is Learner in Leading podcast swag. So there is so much over there that you can sign up. As a reminder, you only need to sign up once. You're all set to go. You only got to do it once within the next 12 hours. But a really good intentional moment for us to pause. We've been live for 55 minutes so far and say, okay, I need to find a way to organize all the stuff I'm learning today to make sure you get as much out of this as possible. So, Zach, I really appreciate you sharing the course link with us, because what another great resource for us to dive into.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to this next half an hour, because the Teach Better team and the Teach Better family, such an amazing, amazing way to connect with colleagues throughout the country. This is wonderful.
So appreciate it. So as we keep diving into this concept of restorative practices, restorative justice, I love that we've been able to already emphasize the fact that these are not things that mean that we are not teaching our students how the consequences of their actions. This really is a way to hit the core issues that might be sparking these choices or behaviors. And we have the power, whether it is as classroom teachers, coaches, administrators, or anything in between, to begin to put these into schools. What do you see as our conversation continues? What do you see as a difference when you're looking at a school that uses restorative justice and a school that does not use restorative justice? What do you feel like are the differences between those types of building cultures and instructional practices?
Fantastic question, Ray. The difference between a building or a classroom that uses RJ and one that doesn't, I believe, number one, the tone and tenor of the class is different in terms of the relationships between students and among all community members. And I think the same thing in the school. Mm-hmm. I think that just the way people connect with each other, I think is very, very different. It's very, very different. And then two, I believe that the degree to which students receive exclusionary disciplines, particularly students of color, the way the rates of exclusionary discipline consequences and the way they're doled out, I believe is very, very, very different. So when folks, let me talk about circle time. You know, we've had circle time since romper room. People act like circles are new. I remember Miss Sally used to put people in a circle back in romper room when she had a little magic mirror, and she would call names, and she would say, and Zachary, and I was so happy that she called my name because she saw me in the magic mirror, Ray. She saw me in the magic mirror, and I know she saw Megan, I know she saw Brian, I know she saw all these other folks in the magic mirror while we were all in a circle. Well, the whole notion, think about the littles in elementary school. The notion of making sure that students know, and it's not just an elementary school concept because we do it at the high school also, making sure that it is a structure that we're going to get people together and just talk about and just actually dive into the human side of teaching and learning. Now, I don't know about you, but you know, kids sometimes act like they don't want to be bothered. They really do. They really do want to share. They really do want to hear. They really do want to be in a community of people. They really do want someone to ask them, how was their weekend? How was their day? And how are they feeling? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those sort of things in the aggregate, they make a massive difference in the tone and tenor of a classroom, let alone the tone and tenor of a school. Massive, massive impact. So I think that when you have these structures in place, it helps kids restore their standing if they do make a poor choice, because it's a safe environment to do so, because everyone feels connected. Okay. Now, when you don't have those things in place, people feel, or students feel more likely or less responsible to their peers because that connection doesn't exist. Okay. That's one. Then if you have structures in place to intentionally purposefully divert students away from exclusionary discipline, number one, it's on everyone's mind to say, we need to think about this. So I have this kid that's done this thing that's not violent at all. It's an irritant, but is it something I really need to put this kid out of class for? When you have restorative practices in a building, people are more conscious of it. So, and then two, in terms of the numbers themselves, when you have something to divert students away from exclusionary disciplinary outcomes, you keep kids in class. You can't teach a kid who's not there. You're not going to improve achievement when there are gaps in the learning process because we've created them because we have not been cognizant of how often we put kids out of class when we could have had an option to keep them in. Mm-hmm. So the big difference is it impacts achievement, it impacts climate. Then talk about sowing seeds of distrust and undermining trust of families who say, well, how can my kid learn? I know my kid is acting up. I have him at home. But still, can you help me help them?
Absolutely. As you think about those circles that I know so many educators not only have been utilizing, like you referenced, but continue to utilize as great ways to foster those relationships, to create that safe space. It was one of my favorite things I was able to do with my middle school students. For those that know, I have a middle school background when in my teaching career, and holy moly, that was just so fun to be able to hang out and actually talk shop and really get to know my students. Language has always been something that's been so directly tied to that. The way that we speak to students, the way that we phrase certain things, especially in that circle, but truly all over, really does foster that respect and trust relationship within a classroom. Any tips or tricks on how we can better in our language for people that may not be familiar, and even just some of those basics?
Ray, when it comes to making sure that we connect with students with speech that is safe and respectful and empowering, think about what students do when they're not with us. Think about the social media lives of students. So oftentimes when I have an 11-year-old, and when they get on their school, they use their school platforms to chat. So even though you may restrict them from Facebook or Instagram or whatever, they'll use their school platforms to chat, or just use the chat features to chat. And when they're talking, they're being snide, they're being snappy, they're doing these things. And they're not always, even though they're joking, they're not always saying the kindest things to each other. The last thing we want to do is to add on to that. So while we think that we're being funny or cute or just a little sarcastic, kids sometimes don't hear it that way. Mm-hmm. Especially in their environment when they're doing it all the time, some of them. And then also, I think that it is, when you actually set up your classroom agreements, I think it's important to agree how the classroom community will speak with each other. And actually know that in certain conversations, there's certain speech that's okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. It's almost like teaching when to code switch. When is it okay to have a conversation that sounds like this versus a conversation that sounds like that? Because because as adults, we understand that, when we actually have to go and talk in the faculty meeting, we may talk like this. But when we get in the parking lot and we caucus in the parking lot, we may sound like that.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I was just talking about code switching yesterday. For those people in our community who may not be aware of that term, will you share a little bit about code switching? Because if you guys are not familiar with this is not only a topic that has always been relevant, but is absolutely an important conversation these days.
So code switching. So when you are in different groups, you communicate differently. It doesn't matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter who you are. Yep. When you are in different communities, you speak differently. It's just what it is. So, So when I am in this environment, I talk one way. But if I have to then go to someone's home who just, this is a true story for me. If I have to go to someone's home because for a sad occasion, because someone just lost a kid to gang violence, I'm going to talk a different way.
Yeah.
I'm a whole different person.
Yep.
I go and I pull from my background. I pull from my cultural African American, Hampton, Virginia, first time college goer, parents growing up with not a whole lot under the Christmas tree. I channel all of that. And then I come from that place. But kids sometimes don't understand that I actually have that conversation with kids all the time. There's a time and a place. I have that conversation with them all the time because I don't know if anyone's having it with them, especially if kids get in trouble to the point where they end up in my office.
Yeah.
So I say, listen, there's a time and place for this. This ain't it.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was, continuously, we're always learning. And there was a point in time in my career where I assumed that code switching had to do with some people, but it didn't have to do with me. And that was constantly this narrative that as I was learning about all these different innovative practices, I'm like, oh, well, some people have to deal with that, but not me. I don't have to deal with that. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us. If you are not familiar with this type of concept, this applies to all of us. I would love to challenge our audience here. If you're up for a little activity, we've been live for an hour and almost 10 minutes now. And we are not just being consumers. We're choosing to be active learners in this experience, especially learning from, oh my gosh, the guru, Zach Robbins right here. I would love to see examples in the comments. I'd love to give for all of you to give us 2 instances where within the 2, you would choose to code switch. I really appreciate, Zach, you giving us an example earlier, but ensuring that this is a personal discussion that we're having this morning. You're not just learning about some idea that doesn't have to do with you and your community, with your students. This is relevant to everybody. So think about it. What's a situation maybe you're experiencing today, maybe later this weekend, or geez, the last 2 weeks have been crazy here in schools. What are 2 different situations where you said, yep, I acted one way in this circumstance, and then I chose to act differently in a different situation? And that is just because there's a certain place and time for that type of action. Zach, I was out yesterday afternoon getting a drink, a happy hour drink, with a member of our ambassador crew. I was so excited to see her. I had not seen her for months and months and months. We were sitting at this fancy schmancy restaurant. And of course, you let your hair down a little bit, right? You order a glass of wine. And that was a very different situation than this morning on live here with you, prim and proper, trying to talk about education.
Right. Just think about it. Code switching. If you don't think so, I know that Steve Harvey has a joke about code switching, and he talked about the first time he learned that folks in church swear. Is a famous Steve Harvey joke, and I just think about that because I have a bunch of friends who are preachers. Sure. Grandmother's a preacher. My grandfather was a preacher. So I sit back and think, code switching. Folks at church are one way. Mm-hmm. When they are around their friends, they may say some things a different way.
Yes, I love this. Even the examples coming in so far, like when you're with teachers talking about your job versus when you're with other professions talking about your job. Brianne Fennell's in the comments talking about her personality changes between the gym and the school environment. There's 1,000 instances, friends. I mean, and we don't just code switch when we move to different locations. We code switch when we pick up the phone and we get a phone call or we're sitting in a meeting. I mean, these are instantaneous choices that we can make. And I think the better we understand how to support our students, not only with restorative justice, restorative practices, but with all these different smaller subcategories that exist in that topic, the better we're going to be able to be for our kiddos.
Absolutely. And I have a question for the folks who are listening. So talk about bringing together the way we enlist parents as partners in order to redirect students' behavior and code switching. Have you ever had a situation in which you talk to a parent differently because you just feel more connected with that parent? Talk about code switching. Have you ever had, if you let's hit us with the green hearts, guys. Have you ever had a situation where you talk to one parent differently because you just feel connected with that parent? You just know it's a safe space to talk a certain way.
Well, and the stress in your body, the difference between making a phone call to a parent that you've only recently had maybe negative interactions with versus a phone call with a parent that every time you talk, they share their appreciation and love for you. I mean, gosh, I can feel it in my chest. It's so different. And those are exactly the situations that exist in our classrooms right now. If your interaction with student is constantly negative, then when you interact, they might feel that stress. It's coming. But when you have that positive relationships with students, you take the time, that's a good feeling. I love these green hearts. I love this.
Absolutely, because there are some families that let you know that they are with you. You know, and why is that? Because you form those sorts of connections and relationships with their children. And that's what can happen when you actually institute these restorative practices. So maybe it's that community building circle as an entry point into the kind of restorative justice structure that diverts students from exclusionary discipline.
You know, Zach, we have about 15 minutes here until we transition into another segment. We're going to welcome on two new faces to our conversation this morning, but very familiar faces of our Teach Better community. But two new faces onto the screen. We're going to be focusing on the topic of collaboration. But I want to make sure as we wrap up our dialogue here, we've been able to speak for the last hour on restorative practices, your background, tips and tricks, all these different ideas. I'd love to end our time together with some call to action, some actionable steps that our community can take, that if this is the only segment they watch in 12 hour, that would be fine because they're going to go really, really impact positively the students in their communities. Can we think through some action steps, some ideas that we can challenge them with here this morning?
Ray, I would say if they do the community building circle. So bring your kids together, put them in a circle and just say, you know, this is a community building circle. This is a safe space. I'm a part of this circle. And the way we're going to do this is I'm just going to ask you some basic questions. This is a time where only one person can speak at a time. You may use a talking stick. You may not. And then you ask questions like, I just want to know, you say, we're going to keep things positive. If you have something you want to share that's on your heart that may be troubling you, everyone is going to listen respectfully because we're a community of learners and we're doing this so we can deepen our community and connection with each other. You may ask a question like, I just want to know, how is everyone feeling today? Did you have a great weekend? Would anyone like to share something good that's happening in their lives? Would anyone like to share something that they're proud of? You know, just ask. And as they get deeper into their community building circle, the questions change because they know their community best and know their kids' needs best. That's one thing that's easy to do. Or you can even start, because some people are maybe a capturing kids' heart school. So maybe you can actually use good things and say, okay, we're going to have a circle. And for our community building circle, we're going to talk about good things. And then actually have kids share their good things in their community building circle as a way for kids to get to know each other better. And also the teacher has to share too, because the teacher has to also be vulnerable so that the kids can feel connected to them. That's one thing. Two, when it comes time for another structure people can put in place, because teachers in their classrooms, some people do like checks on the board. They want to actually do things that may lead to some sort of exclusionary discipline outcome. Okay. Well, perhaps actually have a structure where we say, okay, when kids get to that point, before we do that, let me put something in place where a kid can make things right. And it's not about a power play where I want you to be beholden to me. No, it's about this kid has done something to really distract the class, that disrupted learning, that was hurtful to someone else in the class, and coming up with a process where a kid can make that right. Rather, if it is they actually either in private with the teacher apologize to a kid, maybe they apologize to the class, they do something just to restore their standing. If they roll on a desk, okay, you gotta clean up some desks, man. You wrote all over the desk. It's not right. You have now defaced our school community. If people are if kids are on the playground, someone's playing a little bit too rough, even for the littles, because of course littles are learning how to do school. But even if something is a little bit beyond bounds, actually figuring out a way that kids can make that right too. So another thing that you can do, and I would say if you're really trying to get into this restorative justice structure and trying to understand how to do it, I would definitely say a great starting point is the book Restorative Justice Tribunal and the courses that I'm dropping, because I'm going to be available to folks. In Nevada, that's what I do. I actually get on the phone with people, get on Zoom calls, and I meet with principals and teachers, and we talk. And they ask, how do I do this? And I just coach them through it. Because the more kids we keep in school, the more kids we have dialed in, the better.
Zach, there's so many questions coming in that I want to focus on. One of which is about the second tip or strategy that you gave us. And then the other, we're going to go back to those circles here in a minute. Zach, our comment here is from Dr. Dave Schmittou from the Teach Better team, who'll be live with us later this afternoon. He says, can you define make it right? Oftentimes in schools and classrooms, we struggle with that mindset. I love your focus on allowing the student to be a part of the conversation as you're brainstorming how to make it right. Speak a little bit to that.
Thank you so much, Doc, for the question. So if we're in our Teach Better community,
yeah.
And let's say in the chat room, I just start typing crazy stuff, just being distracting. It's just not right. So I have to make it right. So the question, what does that mean? That means that I have to do something to, number one, acknowledge that was wrong. And two, the other part, restore my standing in the community. To say, look, community, I was wrong. I apologize. I'm not going to do this again. I understand that what I did was not cool. And going forward, I'm gonna do better. Mm-hmm. So in other words, how did I make it right? Number one, I acknowledged it. Mm-hmm. I made my pledge to say, I'm not going to do this again. And I asked for forgiveness. Yeah. So the thing is, and that was the situation for the chat room. So let's say, like, for instance, we've caught kids. So when a kid, we had a kid one time, true story. Actually, this one is in the book. Kid was out of dress code. I think that dress codes and tardies are like the gateway drugs to like exclusionary discipline. It's like, right? So that's why I say, so tardies and dress codes, I ask people, do not put those in your restorative justice track. Number one, you're going to overwhelm your system. And who was really harmed? Did you really harm the community? Was there really a harm that someone's dress didn't have enough fabric on it? Okay, let me keep going. All right, so young lady was out of dress code. So she was going to be given a dress code violation. Here is where the harm happened. When the teacher addressed her, she took off on the teacher, cursed the lady out, the whole 9 yards. It was bad. I mean, it was like really bad. So now we ended up going into a restorative justice structure because she was ready to be suspended. But instead, we put her into the tribunal to keep her in school. So she then at the tribunal, she recognized, teacher didn't deserve that. I was wrong. Because she knew. Yeah, she was mad. She was mad that she got checked because her clothes weren't appropriate for school. Right. And she knew it. She knew it because her mama sent her in one outfit and she changed into another one. So she knew. So the thing is, at the tribunal, she knew she had to make it right with the teacher. So we brought her together with the teacher. She apologized. She said that these were her words. You didn't deserve that. Shouldn't have said those things to you. I know how much you care about kids, and we all know. And this one teacher, she had a reputation for being just really firm about structures and rules. Okay. And all the kids knew it. So because she just had that reputation. She also had a reputation for pushing kids to be successful. Like she will not let up, and everyone also knew that about her. So kids respected her for that. Okay. So in the post conference, when we brought her together with the teachers, you didn't deserve that. I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. Next thing you know, we couldn't keep this young lady out of the teacher's classroom. She didn't even have the teacher on her schedule. It was just that interaction. They formed a relationship, and next thing you know, that teacher is just enforcing a school norm out of care for not only the kids saying that's not right, but saying I care enough to say you shouldn't be walking around with most of your fabric missing from your clothes. Ended up being a really, really great relationship between this young lady and this teacher. And next thing you know, they became very, very close.
That's the best. I love that stuff. And I love the focus on making sure that those conversations occur. And I know that our time is so limited always, right? As teachers, we're like running around like chicken with our heads cut off. There's never enough time to make copies, make phone calls, lesson plan, and do everything we need to do. But these are action steps that we have the power to take in classrooms that will have a long-term benefit. Start it now so that later on you don't have to address it over and over and over. I love the focus today, Zach, exactly what we needed on focusing on the core issues. It does not mean that you're not addressing the negative choices or providing consequences. It does mean, though, that as that happens, you are focused on ensuring that we're supporting that core issue and continuing to build this relationship. Zach, I want to focus on one more thing before our time ends today, and that's to do with those circles. We've had a lot of questions about how these circles can actually be implemented. So can I be a total dork and like walk through silly logistics? Do you mind?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Zach, I'm picturing my classroom. I'm walking into my classroom and I want to do a circle with students. Let's pretend it's like, a few minutes before the kids arrive. I have some time to get set up, right? I want to put some sort of room formation together where we're all in a circle. Is that accurate?
Yes. Okay, so quickly. So there's a school level and there's a classroom level. Sure. So in my situation, I couldn't stop school because I have so many students who are below standards that I need every instructional minute I can get. Sure. So our teachers made a decision. And we got derailed from the pandemic. I mean, they were ready, and then the pandemic hit. But so that's important because if you have a school community where there are a volume of behaviors that happen, you don't want to be in a situation where you're stopping school or stopping class constantly. So you got to choose. But that aside, and I talk about that and I teach people how do you manage that. So something has happened. We actually ask parents, because I truly believe you cannot just do stuff without parents knowing, because there may be some history between students that you don't know about. Sure. Okay. So number one, bring the kids together and you ask. So they're effective questions. The ones that they're not like super questions. They're not like mystery questions. They're not like a Rosetta Stone. You just have your effective questions. So the ones we ask are what happened? Okay. How did what happened impact you and others? This whole notion of it's not just you, it's how did it impact other people? Sure. What is your responsibility to make the classroom community better? Okay. Yep. And then what's the solution? How are we going to fix this? Okay. So, and we give the kids an opportunity to answer these questions one at a time. Now, ultimately, the teacher will have some solutions in mind. Sure. but the kids usually come up with some ingenious solutions. Now that's in a classroom. So when there's a circle, sometimes we do a whole classroom circle if instruction has been disrupted and it impacted every single learner in that room. If the incident that happened, let's say there's a verbal altercation in the classroom and it's like 2 or 3 kids. The only kids who need to be in that circle are maybe 2 or 3 kids and maybe 2 or 3 bystanders, and that's it. You don't need the whole class. This is not a public shaming moment. So you just need a handful of folks just to be there. You go through the same questions. And then the bystanders also get an opportunity to answer the, how did that impact you? Just so kids can can understand, this is how this impacted the class. That's important because kids have to take ownership of how their actions impact others. And that's how you bring the community together and make sure they're more tight-knit.
And this is something that I can choose to implement before an instance occurs to really build this like cultural norm that this is something that we do as a community. So as you are thinking through getting this set up in your classroom, if you're listening this morning, or even if you're catching this after a fact in the Teach Better Academy, we want to make sure that you are not only doing this when it's relevant, it's a hot topic in your classroom, but also fostering these types of supports when it nothing's happened yet. We want to create a safe environment for students. So set up that circle. If it's a full class, you need more chairs. If it's a smaller group, you only need the chairs that you need. And then you can start looking at either really essential questions to ask when a specific situation has occurred that you want to address, or Google some fun, goofy questions, get students talking. Some of the hardest parts of getting circles started is not getting the students feeling comfortable to use their voice and share. So get some goofy questions going. So many of us have already kind of have our curated list as we were going through this global pandemic and teaching online to try and get students to share their voice. Those are the same types of questions, those goofy this or that, or share a positive in your week thus far. Let's add in a celebration. These are easy things to do now so that when situations do come up, because we're only human and we teach tiny humans, these are going to be a very easy transition for us to make that your students will understand how to adapt and accommodate to, which is awesome.
Such a great summation, Ray. Fantastic summation.
You know, Zach, I want to make sure our community can stay connected to you after today. I love that we were able to share the direct link to your course about a half an hour ago in the show. We'll make sure to obviously keep promoting all the work that you're doing. And of course, good reminder, we also shared the link to the giveaways that we'll be doing all show long. But Zach, I do want to make sure this is just the beginning of our community connecting with you. So how can people stay connected?
Absolutely. Ray, this has been so much fun. And Teach Better community, please stay connected because connection is divine. At Dr. Zach Robbins on both Instagram and Twitter. Okay. Schoolsthatmovesouls.com is my course website, and Dr. Zach Robbins and Zacharys.com is my author's website. So look, just stay connected because we all need each other. I mean, this profession, we learn from each other. We grow when iron sharpens iron. So let's just stay connected and let's keep doing amazing work together.
Zach, it was an honor to honestly speak to you on 12 Hour. Thank you for kicking off our 12-hour live today. As a reminder to our community, we are live at 8 a.m. Eastern, and we are live all the way through 8 p.m. Eastern. So we have a lot more coming at you. We are going to transition here to a brand new segment that we're thrilled to bring to you with the one and only Brad Hughes, who you know that I always love to watch. He is joined by an incredible guest, and they will be talking about collaboration for the soul. And don't we all just need that, Zach? A little more collaboration.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. They'll also have more giveaways and more surprises. So make sure that you share this stream. Please promote this to your family and friends and colleagues. It's a great opportunity for free professional development for all types of educators today, and an opportunity to connect with brand new guests. So we'll be right back. Zach, thank you again for joining us. Awesome to see you.
Ray, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
See you soon, friends.